Welcome to Shop Talk Live, episode number 295. We've got a fun one with Vic and Mike debating table saw or no table saw for the last time for a while, I'd say. Also, we discuss all-time favorite tools and when is the right time to sell that tool that you just don't use anymore. Before we get started, I have a question for y'all. We have been thinking about starting a Discord channel for Shop Talk Live listeners, and I'm curious if that is something that you would use and or find interesting. If it is, or if it's not, leave a comment in YouTube or on the show notes page on finewoodworking.com and let me know. I think that there's a lot of conversations to be had among the listeners of the show. I know that. And to be honest with you, a lot of times the discussions are happening between me and a listener as opposed to all of the listeners because it's information that is useful for everyone. So just think about it. Discord, Shop Talk Live Discord, yay, nay, woohoo, boo. Let me know. Also, real quick note, I just got an email from Sarah in marketing, and she wanted me to tell you that you can use the code podcast20 for any courses on Fine Woodworking's e-learning site. So head on over to finewoodworking.com/e-learning, check them out. And if you want to save 20% on any of those courses, podcast20. There you go, Sarah. All right, on with the show. So I woke up this morning, thought I'd pick a fight between you two. All right, we have a question from Zachary. And for the audience, apologies to Mike and Vic. It was a holiday week mess up, and I did not realize that we were recording the next day, and I did not send out these questions until this very morning. So they did not have their normal 24-hour notice of the arguments to come. From Zachary, I'm setting up a small shop on one side of a two-car garage. I've got a Laguna 14BX bandsaw, 2 routers, DeWalt planer, as well as numerous other small tools. I also have a Bosch contractor saw I've been using for the last few years, but isn't the best for building furniture because I have to square up the fence each time I need to make a cut. Yuck. As Vic and the rest of the veterans at Shop Talk Live are considerably more experienced than I have, you can see much further down the woodworking road than I can, envisioning all the twists, turns, bumps, and potholes along the way. I'm at a crossroads of what to do about a table saw. I'm tempted by Vic's take on this to eliminate the table saw altogether. To his point, it takes up a lot of space. I'm thinking with the purchase of a good track saw and investment in a nicer router table setup, I could eliminate the table saw from my workflow. However, if I decided to go with a table saw, I would likely get a 30-inch saw stop contractor with cast iron wings, mobile base, about $3,000. I'd be interested in hearing the limitations to going sans table saw, or accommodations that would need to be made, and what else I might need to consider if I decided to go that route. For instance, would the addition of an MFT help with ensuring square cuts on the track saw? Yes, let's get that out of the way right now. I'm hoping to build one of Philip Morley's lounge chairs. Limitation, it requires cutting a cove cut on the table saw. That would be a bummer. What else could I be missing? What would I need to make this work? Does each side, for and against, feel like I should be aware of before making a decision? Longtime listener and multi-year unlimited member, Zachary. So, and when I sent this out to you two, I said, this question's for Vic, but Mike gets to answer it. And Vic gets to reply. Mike.
Oh, I thought Vic got to answer it.
No.
I get to answer it.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I want to say, first off, in Vic's defense, Vic, you are not anti-table saw. Your
Absolutely
table
not.
saw ownership tends to ebb and flow depending on the shop that you happen to be working in.
True. Yep.
And I think for Zachary, I think that's like really germane to your situation in that you referenced having half of a 2-car garage shop to work in. I apologize for my snide comment that why are you only working in half of it? I understand that. I think the fact that you secured half of a 2-car garage for your shop is a victory, more power to you. But, you know, being a smaller space, I think that does dictate and shape the tools you have, and you can literally just fit in that space. I would say this because you did mention the MFT. I get that mixed up with the NFTs, but
non-fungible tokens or whatever.
Yeah. So the thing the thought that came to mind is that every tool, every machine, it's not just a tool. It represents a path, meaning that the tools you own are going to shape how you work. So let's say, like, for instance, it's like, instead of using a table saw, I want to get an MFT, as if this is this is a substitute for this tool. No, it's not. Like an MFT, like a domino versus a hollow chisel mortiser versus a plunge router, the minute you sort of kind of lock into one of those solutions, they lead you down a path to other solutions tied to that. So other ways of working tied to that tool. So do you need a table saw? Short answer is no. The other short answer is yes. And you brought up some really good questions about, will I miss it? This is what I'm doing. This is what I want to do. Sounded like I needed a table saw to make a cove cut. Nope. That's just how Philip Morley did it, because he had a table saw and it was an easy way to make a cove. You can do it a router table with, you're not going to find a bit to match the cove, but you can get a straight bit, draw out your profile, make a series of notches, smooth it out, and you've got your cove. There's always a way to do everything. And, so it's like, okay, you have a table saw, you know what it does. Yours is kind of small and cumbersome, and you understand it's not really going to serve you well if you're committing to a table saw. So I think one answer is you can do a lot of work with the bandsaw and hand tools. You can add a skill saw to that and do a lot more work, a track saw, and then you start to build a table around using that, and you can do a lot more things. I think the fact that you mentioned the Philip Morley lounge chair is a really good thing, which is, what do you want to make in your shop? You know, the shop space, the tools you use, really dependent on what you want to do there. So my answer would be, I hate to say this. I'm going to say it just as a segue for Vic to make this point. But yeah, so I would say you're at a point where you're either deal with the table saw you have, work your way around it. I think that's sort of a middle ground. I think another way to go is to get a better table saw. That's really going to take you down that path. And then if you go with the MFT instead of a table saw right now, that's going to take you down a whole other path, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I'm just not really aware of that. However, Vic is much more well-versed in this and can speak more intelligently to that. So hopefully Vic's answer is to go with the MFT and not the table saw, because otherwise, sorry, Vic, that's just a bad answer. What do you think about that?
I'm going to get in the middle. I'm going to get in the middle because I think, Mike, you went easy.
I went what?
You went easy on the question.
Oh, get a table saw. That's my answer.
Well, here is the difference between you two. Mike, your table saw is your primary means of creating joinery.
It is. I mean, that's what I was talking about. That's my path. And It's like my favorite tool of all time of the week is going to speak directly to that, where, a tool is like how it's tuned, what you use it for, what you do with it. Like a router's not a router. A router is just a possibility. You know, it's like the things you can do with the router if you want to, the things you can do with the table saw if you want to. That's where things explode. So so I have a table saw and I use it for a billion things, like cutting coves. If I didn't have a table saw, I can do all of those things some other way. So it's just, that's the path I fell down 30 years ago and I'm still on it.
But I think that when many people think about getting rid of their table saw, and Vic, tell me if I'm wrong, the MFT comes in for repeatable crosscuts, for all of these, repeatable 45s or whatever. the MFT is replacing one very small element of what somebody like Mike uses the table saw for. Like Mike's using, like the MFT is replacing Mike's miter gauge and his crosscut sled, but it is not going to replace his tenon jig and spacer blocks. And the MFT is not going to help Mike do twin tenons, right?
Right. And to be fair, Mike doesn't need help or doesn't need to switch because Mike has many, many years of working with his table saw, and he's become very comfortable with the way that works. And this isn't like when I have these discussions, like if Mike and I sat down at a bar and drank a beer, we would be taking it out of each other or saying, yeah, okay, table saw jockey. And then, yeah, okay, like we would make, just kind of like the whole sort of Ford and Chevy argument, right?
I think it honestly, maybe for 5 minutes, but I think beyond that, it's like, hey, how do you do that?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Like,
it would turn into like, oh, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Right. Because when you think about it, Mike said it really well. The tools you have will inform the work that you do. And you can, and Mike's absolutely right. I'm thinking like, I've cut coves with a table saw. I don't enjoy doing it. No. I don't like the way it feels.
I don't think anyone
feel
likes
a
it.
little bit funny in my bathing suit area. And so I don't, you know what I mean? I understand what's happening. I understand where the pitfalls are. I've seen boards come flying off of the top of a table saw before because things weren't secured properly or things weren't held properly. And so for me, it's just not something I'm interested in doing. And so what that means is that I've not really built anything with a cove, right? And that's okay, right? You can build Philip Morley's chair without a cove, right? You just have to shape it differently and it wouldn't look exactly like Philip Morley's chair. Which is okay too. I'm sure Philip Morley would be stoked about that you kind of riffed off of something that he sort of riffed off of. Because I mean, we're always riffing off of something. But I think that like, if you were to say like comparison, like how do you do a rabbit, right? Well, the rabbit, those simple things, right, are really easy. They both can do it, right? I can cut a rabbit using the track saw. I can use a rabbit cutting using a router. I can make end grain rabbits using my miter saw and a spacer. I can do all kinds of different things. And the thing for me is that Mike's right. I have had table saws in the past. I had one like 20 years ago, and then my shop changed and I decided I didn't want it there. And then somebody was upgrading their table saw and said, hey, do you want a free Delta contractor saw with fancy fence and all the fixings? And I thought, sure, let's see if I can work it into my system. And so I couldn't work it into my system. It basically just turned into a giant platform for which I used my truck saw on. And so like, that's a really big table, right? And I think that I think a lot of people are in a similar boat where their table saw ends up pulling a lot of different duties, like putting, it's an assembly surface, it's a flat surface to check, squareness or different heights of legs or those sorts of things. But yeah, if you're new to this and you already don't have 10, 20 years of time at a machine, then it's an open discussion, and it really boils down to, as Mike sort of tailed off with, what do you want to make, right? Like in a lot of cases, small parts can be difficult with a track saw, right? Because you have a width of track, and once pieces get small enough that they go underneath that track, that becomes unsafe and difficult to predict the results of. And so you have to have a solution for that. Right? So if you want to get into making pet urns, then perhaps the track saw is not where you want to be, right? And it really boils down to just how you want to work and the space you have. If you have half of a 2-car garage, which in metric that would be 0.5 of a 2-car garage.
How many EVs is that?
And so, I would be very hesitant to put a table saw in there just because the table saw you put in there has to be a smaller one. And I've yet to, even the saw stop smaller ones like the contractor and the little job site and all that other stuff, I know a lot of people use them. I just find that they're sort of like table saw objects. They're not as robust as a small cabinet saw. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of room, and sometimes people don't have the power requirements and all that other stuff. Whether you get a track saw, whether you get a table saw, there's no right answer. The answer is what you need to use in order to, you know what I mean? It's the whole reason I wrote those books. I didn't want people to think that if they couldn't run power tools that they couldn't woodwork, because, you know, we all three of us here know that's not true. Right? Mike was suggesting making a cove by cutting a series of rabbets and then fairing them out. And I mean, you can use a compass plane, you can use molding planes. There's all kinds of ways that you can do that. Heck, you could get a scraper that's shaped to the, and you know, it would take a little while, but you could do it. And so, or I think one of my favorite methods is Adrian Ferrazzuti putting a custom caul in his belt sander and doing that. But
Matt Bickford did an article for us on using hollows and rounds to cut a cove.
Exactly.
It's just like, oh, of course, yes. Before they had table saws,
right? And to be fair,
coves.
Yeah,
you know, you're making a cabinet. You're making a cabinet with a bit of coving, right? You're not fitting out kitchens. So, you know, kind of keep that in mind as well. I've always felt the table saw, and again, this is not against, you know, people who love the table saw, but for me, the table saw is very much suited for repeatable work. Right? It allows you to cut multiple pieces at a certain width, multiple pieces to certain lengths, multiple pieces to an angle. Whereas I can achieve those same things with hand tools or with hand power tools. You know, the only difference really is that you're taking the tool to the work rather than the work to the tool.
Right.
And I mean, you know, cutting bevels or cutting miters, you know, an MFT with the whole matrix on it. It doesn't have to be like a Festool branded anything, right? There's all kinds of equipment out there that allow you to build your own whole matrices. You know, the folks at Axminster do a nice little bench system that works really well. So, I mean, you don't have to go and buy the whole farm. And I mean, you don't have to even use Festool for that matter. I mean, there's lots of companies, including Wen, apparently, that are making track saws now. So beware, I'm sure it's as good as you think it is. But there's all kinds of options available. So it's not a matter of like, I mean, I don't own a pickup truck and I make fun of pickup truck drivers just because it's fun to do. I see the utility of a pickup truck, but I don't need one because I don't use that sort of thing. So it's not like you're an idiot because you do this or you're an idiot because you do that, which unfortunately is the world we live in right now. The reality is that you really have to consider what it is you want to do and then equip your shop appropriately. That's, you know, so there's no battle of the bands here. You know, table saw versus track saw. They will get the job done.
I think that first off, I have a table saw. It's probably my least used tool. When I use it, I'm just about everything I do is small, but that is when I really use it, is when I'm doing these teeny tiny things. And repeatability, like you said, Vic. But my big thing about reading Zachary's question is everybody's twists and turns and bumps and potholes are gonna be unique. Mm-hmm. You know, there was a time when I thought this shop space was going to be set up for making ladder back chairs, you know, and it just didn't work out that way. And just 7 years after moving in and starting to set up the shop, am I finally figuring out, okay, I'm going to mostly make teeny tiny instruments in here and everything else will be done at a different shop. And I know what's important in this space. A table saw takes up a lot of room. An MFT takes up less room, but it's not as usable as a nice workbench. It's not as so for me, if I was making this question, I'd get the track saw if it's in the budget, because you're going to be happy you have a track saw. You will always be happy you have a track saw, I think. Even at the fine woodworking shop, we've got the 50 some odd inch fence on the saw stop. I bring my track saw down there to crosscut a 8-foot sheet of plywood because I feel better doing it that way. And that's what's important. Now, I would make a small work surface for the track saw, one of those crosscut tables type things with dogs or fences or whatever, and see if that works for you. But I would be really hesitant to answer an either or, because it's just, there's nobody out there who can tell you for you what's going to work, Zachary, unless you start working in one way or another. And I think the best thing to do is get a track saw and see if that works with your workflow. And then if it doesn't, start saving up for, saving up to replace that $500-700 investment into a new table saw. I don't know, but
the other thing I'd like to mention is that if it's a financial concern where you only have a certain budget, right? You've got this. We already know about the space. We don't know about Zachary's budget necessarily.
He's saying he could decide to go with a saw stop, with a $3,000 saw stop. So he's got some budget. Yeah.
So $3,000 can get you like premium level track saw, rails, router, and a vacuum, so that you can work completely dust-free. Well, dust-free, as dust-free as you can get, and do all of that, all of that work, right? So when you consider the cost of a good table saw versus the cost, like if you just that alone, just the financial side of it, you're better off, I think, to go with a track saw and router. But if you have the room, have the space, and you are committed to working with a table saw because that's what you know and that's what you like, then get the table saw, because you won't be happy with the track saw, right? Like you'll be always wanting for doing it a different way, and you'll regret the decision. But you have to be really introspective, I think. You really have to kind of take a good look at how you do stuff and how you want to do stuff. And don't base that upon how others do stuff, right? Like a lot of people do things completely differently. Some people work only with hand tools, right? That doesn't mean you should sell everything that's got a cord and become a hand tool woodworker, because you're going to miss out on the speed at which you can do certain operations. I mean, you just got to give it a hard think. And like Mike said, there's no right or wrong answer. It's not yes, get a table saw, no, don't get a table saw. It's what's going to be best for you.
Yeah. And the other thing, like you said, it's not an either or. I think really important concepts to keep in mind is that, is it a situation where it makes more sense to bring the tool to the board? Meaning bringing a track saw to a big sheet of plywood, or bringing stock to run profiles to a router table. So you're bringing the workpiece to the machine. Or are you bringing a handheld router to a workpiece, or bringing a workpiece to a router table? Are you bringing a workpiece to the table saw? Are you bringing a track saw to the workpiece? The bandsaw, you can take a workpiece to the bandsaw, or you can get a jigsaw and bring the bandsaw to the workpiece. So it has to do with scale of parts as well. So it's all those things come to mind in terms of what are you trying to accomplish? So I think to kind of get to the core of the matter, what the tool or machine is doing to the workpiece, what the workpiece is doing, is it stationary, is it moving? Those things will help define your needs. Like you said, if you're working sheet goods, in a commercial shop, you have a big wall-mounted panel saw, and it's a highfalutin track saw. I have a table saw. I have a circ saw. If I'm working sheet goods, I bring the circ saw to the sheet goods, just like everybody else does. So, yeah, lots of ways to go about it. I think a really good point I think is being made, Vic was making it really well, is that don't think you need a specific tool or a machine to build a piece or complete a task, because there's not a single way to do it. Figure it out, see what makes sense with what you have. And then once you're frustrated at what you have and you think you want something else based on what you've been doing, then let that drive your path forward.
So I think that, Mike, your style, your design sense and everything was probably well informed by the fact that you have a hollow chisel mortiser and a table saw.
Yeah.
Because those two tools made it simple for you to do those, many of your design.
The hollow chisel mortiser was informed by drilling and chopping my mortises.
Exactly. And so I think without those two tools, it's possible that your furniture design sense would have maybe gone in a different direction, right?
Sure. If I had decided instead of drilling and chopping, I bought a plunge router and I got a little box for mortising. And so now I'm routing my mortises. Now my mortise ends are round, and I'm kind of dealing with that. Now maybe I'm looking at a domino, which is a routed mortise, or a panther router, which is a really flexible way to route my mortises. And again, so that tool is the path. The drilling and chopping took me down to the path to hollow chisel mortising, whereas if I started to route my mortises, which a lot of people do, it's going to take me in a whole different direction.
But we could stick you on a desert island with, a random collection of tools, and you could still make your furniture.
Sure.
But I do think that those tools led you down the path that you are on now. But there's no way for you to foresee that 20 years ago when you bought the bunch of Delta, planer and joiner and the Unisaw. There was no way for you to foresee that. So there's no way for Zachary to know what tools will be important to him 20 or 30 years from now. The important thing is get out in your shop and start woodworking and making things that you like, whether that's with a track saw, a table saw, whatever. Find a way of doing it, because if somebody is frozen by this decision, you're just wasting time. So
I would just sell it all and get a CNC. Just make everything with the CNC.
That's your next book. Make everything with the CNC.
Minimalist CNC.
I like that.
And a laser. Get a laser too.
Hey, I've been thinking about getting a laser.
Hey, listen, I'm joking about it. I'm thinking about it too, because man, oh man, like you can do, and actually the CNC, now that I'm making a stupid joke into something that actually makes sense, like cutting ribs and making bending forms and all that other kind of stuff. And like, if you had a CNC, good Lord, like you could just, now there's a guy just up the street that does have a CNC. And so I can send him files and he can cut me ribs if I want them or whatever. But yeah, I would use it for that for sure.
So I have been doing a lot of woodworking on the computer the past 2 weeks or whatever. We have a CNC at the shop, and I've decided, okay, let's dive in. I've had a small CNC in the past. It's not out of my range of comfort levels, but I've thought, okay, I need to get this thing going. I need to find a way of making it work for me and figuring out how I'm going to use it and what's important. And I'm a pretend luthier. So of course, bending forms were the first thing. And so I've got the CNC going. Now I need to jump into, and I have to CAD up all of my ukulele designs pretty much. Because once they're in the computer, I can then scale it down. I can do this, I can do that, and I can change it. I can just send it over the machine and zip, 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 and it's done. And the entire time I've been doing it, I keep thinking, I'm sitting there on the computer and my woodworking brain is firing, and I am a woodworker in that moment. And if you don't think I am, you're wrong. I am a woodworker when I'm operating CAD, and I am sitting there doing things in Fusion 360 right now. I've been taking like online classes in Fusion 360. I am doing things that I'm sitting there going, if you think that this is a skill-free thing, you're wrong. 100%. I am firing right now. Like, and my CAD designs are better than they've ever been. And just because a router controlled by a bunch of servo motors is actually doing the physical thing, that doesn't make it any less woodworking. And I've never been more confident in that take in my life of this is woodworking. I don't care what you say.
I love that line. My woodworking brain was firing, and that's exactly it. Are you using this tool or machine or CNC or scrub plane? Is that where everything is happening for you? So it's like, that's woodworking for you. And I think the answer is different. So I'm glad you said that. Actually, I was just reading a editorial, and it's the same old trope. It's like, people with machines and table saws and jigs, that's not woodworking. You have to get back to the hand tools. That's where it's at. It's about these skills, and you need to build this skill, and you need to spend 5 generations building the skill to use a scrub plane to flatten a board before you can make a step stool. It's like, no. If that is your bliss, and that's, old-timey hand tools in a barn, more power to you. I get that. I'm not going to argue against that, but I don't want anyone to argue anybody else into saying this is what woodworking is and everything else is not that. That's not right.
Yeah.
Anytime sentences start with "you need" or "you should," I stop reading. Because
you should really read my book, though.
Well, you can say that because I already have, but you know what I mean? Like, it's just, as soon as dogma enters in, and at this point we could be talking about anything, but as soon as dogma enters into the argument, then it's like, okay, like we're
right.
Now we're just having a bun fight, and it's not. And I've never been dogmatic about what I do. I've never listened to people who are dogmatic. I like people who are open-minded and who are willing to sort of change their mind about things. There was a time when CNC first came out that I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. But then as it started to sort of develop and I saw the attributes of it, it's the same thing with the shaper router thingy. It's like, I get that it can do some pretty cool stuff, but it's not for me at this point. But if it comes to a point where I do think that it would be beneficial, I would take a look at it. Yeah. But I mean, to say, you can't woodwork unless you have a Shaper 3D, or you can't woodwork unless you're using a scrub plane. It's like, Mike, you nailed it right on the head. If you get joy out of operating hand tools, fantastic. I see people who run table saws who, who strive for accuracy at the table saw, and you see how much fun they're having tweaking stuff, right? And it's like, why would I suggest that they need to do anything different, right? They're getting joy out of doing that. Right? Ben's getting joy out of learning how to tweak designs, elongating things, put a spline in somewhere. Like, all of those things are what are getting Ben excited right now, right? And as much as like it can be scary when Ben gets excited, I'm going to encourage it every time, because for how many of us is this a hobby in which we're trying to get away from all of the other stuff? I'm sure woodworking keeps everybody saner. And so, why would, and then to be reading an editorial that says, you should do this and you should do that. And you can edit that part out if you want.
I'm just gonna blur it and just let everyone wonder what happened.
What did he do there? Yeah.
Well,
Put a big old smiley face emoji on top of
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah,
It's done. It's done. All right. Smiley face emoji. 44 minutes. All right. Since 1928, Woodcraft has been outfitting woodworkers and their shops with everything woodworkers want. Whether it's the world's best tools you're looking for, or that special species of wood for your next project, Woodcraft has been helping you make wood work for more than 90 years. Visit woodcraft.com or shop one of their 75 stores nationwide to create something cool. We're back. That is officially the last time we will answer the table saw or no table saw question.
Oh, of course.
For
Yeah, sure.
20 episodes.
until we answer the miter saw or no miter saw question.
Well, that
Coming up.
that might be coming up. I am going to start things off with a really quick all-time favorite technique / tool of all time for this week. And I had a hard time because, like I said, past 2 weeks I've been in front of a computer, and I just want to talk about CAD right now, but nobody wants to hear me talk about CAD. So, I have little teeny tiny magnets that you buy to put on business cards or whatever. It's sheet magnets.
Mm-hmm.
You already have your mind blown. They're a 32nd of an inch thick.
What does that mean?
That means you can stack two of them and get a 16th of an inch. Wait.
Conversion
No,
chart here.
I've got it right here. They are
0.79 millimeters. So 0.8 millimeters.
I have 793 millimeters, or 0.0312 on my wall chart. So if you are using little spacers to space out drawer boxes or door reveals or whatevers, I cut up a whole bunch of these little magnet sheets to a random size. It looks like 3/4 of an inch by 1.5 inches. It doesn't matter though. 2 inches. And you could just stack them up and they stay stacked up because they're magnetic.
What's like dial caliper? What do they measure to? Are they like right on, a little fat, a little under?
Okay. Mike, dang it. They're two. Okay. A stack of two is 0.03 of an inch above a 16th of an inch.
Okay.
That's not going to work.
No, that's okay.
0.03 of an inch.
That's okay. Yeah.
And if you squeeze the dial caliper hard enough, it's right on.
Oh, I love doing that. I can make my dial caliper read anything.
Yeah.
If you think for 1 minute that using a 16th of an inch, 0.03 over is going to look good on a cabinet, you're mad. I'd be able to spot that a mile away.
The only thing that I'm thinking is there's adhesive on the back of them. So I took a piece of paper I took the sticky bit off or the peely bit off. And this is in fact, Bob Van Dyke, Connecticut Valley School of Woodworking pad paper. So whatever his paper is, that's what that measurement equals. If you were able to find thinner paper, it would be thinner. But I like my little magnets.
Very cool.
That is cool. I think that's a really neat idea. And that solves the age-old problem of like when you're stacking, like playing cards or whatever, like they don't stick together and they fall all over the place. And then you got to tape them. Now you've just added another 3 thou, which we already established is not a good thing. I think that's brilliant. I use it for stickers. So like if I get a sticker from somebody or something, I don't like that I would just peel it, stick it to something in there. But what if I want to move it?
I know.
So I just use those.
It's so much stress. Stickers are so stressful.
They don't need to be, Ben. Just stick them onto your
I have some right
shims.
here that I've been like, what do I do with them?
That's what I do. And then I can put some on my bandsaw and I want to start, actually, while we're talking about stickers, Mike says stuff on this show that I think should be like our motivational quote level.
A router is not a
sort of
router. A router,
A router is not a
possibility.
router. It's an
I wrote
opportunity.
it down.
That needs to be
Possibility.
a sticker. And I'm not
Yeah.
not taking the piss out of Mike right now. I'm being very serious. Mike has very eloquent ways to describe things. And that's why I love both of your books, because there are little nuggets like that I think people should have in their shop, right? To remind them not to be too dear about things.
Okay.
So anyway, I would buy the whole set of stickers. I think it would be fantastic. You could put it on your bandsaw. You could have one for the band, like a bandsaw one. We could have like poster-sized ones with like just Mike's head. You know what I mean? I think.
Can we do like all of the quotes that form a word cloud that eventually, if you step back far enough, it becomes Mike's head?
Oh, amazing!
Wow.
Now we're talking.
So, Vic, what's your favorite tool of all time of the week?
So, I'm building a whisper box. So, I own an HVHP dust collector.
Every time you say a whisper box, I think of like some movie, like some horror movie, like it's the title of a horror movie, The Whisper Box.
Never thought of that.
Just that you know.
That could also be a good band name.
Yeah, or album name, definitely. All right.
Album name for sure. Anyway, so I was inspired by this guy in the Netherlands who basically built a very similar sort of device. And so I'm building it such that I'm using some plumbing components, just some 1.5 inch ABS black pipe. And so while the inside diameter of a 1.5 inch ABS pipe is pretty exacting, as far as pipe goes, the outside doesn't equal up to anything.
Yeah.
It's nothing good in metric. It's nothing good in imperial. It's just something. And so I was struggling because I was like, well, I could use a hole saw, I could use a Forstner bit, but it's either going to be too big or too small, or I got to spend like $80 on some Forstner bit that I'll use 3 times and that's it. And I can't stomach the thought of that. And so I remembered that I have the little plunge base for the Dremel that Veritas put out a number of years ago. And it comes, well, it doesn't come with, you have to buy it, but it has a trammel situation. And the trammel works such that you can basically put the pin right beside the router bit. So you could make a dime, and just turn this thing around. And so I thought, wait a minute, why don't I use this to create my hole? Then I can jigsaw the inside out and then use a flush trim bit, and then life is good. And so I did a test with it, and if I use the right size router bit, I even get the wall thickness of the pipe, which is nice because that's how it allowed me to test fit it. And I thought I had everything I needed right here. I didn't need to go out and get something fancy. So you could do that with almost any router. If you do like a one-time jig or whatever, like you don't have to have an adjustable one like mine. I mean, you can use a piece of wood and a nail, and it'll work. And I wanted it to be exacting fit because there's going to be an awful lot of air pressure pumping through there, and I didn't want, things, coming apart. And I also didn't want to have to worry about like putting a bunch of caulking or something around there in order to, because I want to be able to remove things, and because it's still very much experimental at this point.
Cool.
But anyway, so my favorite tool of all time this week is tiny little Dremel router base and a trammel.
I love how many methods I was thinking of. Like, where's he going with this? Where's he going with this? He's going to go there. And that was the simplest of them. So, and I didn't get there. You got there before I did. But I was like, I love the simplest solution.
Well, and man, if I had a CNC, That would have been the simplest solution.
Well, and like, I don't know. I have issues with some particular tool owners who feel the need to tell me how quickly their $3,000 tool could do this thing that is very simple and easy to do, or cheaply other ways. Some people are always like, "Oh, if you had a so-and-so," it's always like, but I'm very proud of you right now, Vic. You used the simplest way, and I love it.
I just needed a way to micro adjust the router bit away from the point and then test it, put the pipe in. Nope, I need a bit more. I eyeballed it at first just to get it close. I used to be in the artillery when I was in the Army. And so we used to use a targeting system called bracketing, where you basically launch one past and then launch one close and then split the difference, and you're all set.
There, learn something new every day.
Well, I do that with my marking gauge, as most people do, right? You get close with the center, and then now you only have to split like, a couple of millimeters, and that's easy to do. Anyway.
What you got, Mike?
I like simple and I like perfect. Like those two things combined, that's like everything.
And Mike, how many times, I love, t-shirt.
Stickers.
How many times does simple yield perfect the fastest way? Almost every time.
Every time. Yep.
Yeah.
If you have to overthink it, do this, do that, you know what I mean? It's like, nah. Simple solution will yield you best results like 87% of the time.
Yeah, like simple and sloppy, no, that's not good. But super complex and perfect, no, that's not good either.
Right.
It's like, hit that sweet spot. Yes.
There is a whole range of tools and woodworkers out there who, again, they're having fun. But they are coming up with the most complicated way of doing something simple.
Yeah.
And if you're having fun, that's great.
Yeah, you're having fun. Yes, that's it.
But I think many times that's confusing, or people are confusing that with good engineering.
Right.
And I think that's bad engineering.
But for me, it's that creative problem solving to where it goes back to, it isn't the tool, it's the application of the tool. Mm-hmm. It's like, how are you putting it to use? How are you thinking in this tool in order to get the result that you want?
Yeah.
To me, that's the joy, whether it's CNC or little
mortar and pestle.
Mortar and pestle. Yeah, don't get me started there. Okay. So my favorite technique, toolish thing of all time is kind of my table saw, and is this thing here.
For the audio listeners, he has two pieces of wood.
Yes, literally two pieces of wood, a T-tracks, two star knobs, two hinges, and a hold-down clamp. So this is where I found myself, Ben. This is why I was so excited by your answer and your phrasing. I was in my shop prepping for a class in a couple weeks, and normally it's like class prep and jigs and, parts. It's not romantic. I don't photograph it. I don't Instagram it. And I tend to, because of that, not allow myself the joy in like, oh, this isn't real woodworking. This doesn't count as furniture making. I'm in my shop, but it doesn't count. But no, like I was having so much fun solving a very simple problem in a really efficient way that it was like, what'd you say? My woodworking brain was firing doing this. I had a blast. So basically, I'm going to be teaching in someone else's shop, and we're going to be cutting small parts to two different very precise lengths. And it's like, okay, well, I like flip stops. Flip stops work really well. I can clamp them to the crosscut sled. But the crosscut sled at the school, I need to know how high the fence is for the crosscut sled so I know how long to make the flip stops so I can, register them across the top of the fence, clamp them in place, and slide them back and forth. I said, well, I don't know that. In fact, I had to make some custom stops when I was teaching there last year as well. So I got those out and I said, no, this is still kind of dumb. I wish I knew the height of that fence. And then I thought, well, don't use the fence. Add your own auxiliary fence to the inside face of the crosscut sled, and then you can attach whatever you want to attach to the top of your fence because you know the height, and all you have to do is take it, clamp it onto the crosscut sled, and there you go. So this is basically, it's a piece of maple, 1.25 by 3 inches by about 28 inches long. So basically, it's like a crosscut sled fence minus the rest of the crosscut. I cut a 3/4 inch groove along the top, put some T-track in there. I made some simple flip stops, drilled a hole in there, and attached those to the T-track with star knobs so I can slide those wherever I want those, and that's good. And then I said, okay, this is really good, but these parts are pretty short. And by the time you get your hand in there between the flip stop and the blade with the little workpiece, that's too tight. What am I going to do? It's like, and I was trying to think, well, I need some sort of hold down on there. I started to have something, well, it'd be really cool if I had a hold down, which attached to the T-track, and I could slide it over and kind of use that as a hold down. And that kind of worked out good, but the solution was a little bit too cumbersome, filtering it through 15 students, getting through this thing 8 times per project or whatever. So because I didn't want to screw a Destaco clamp down to the school's crosscut sled, I added a base, basically a 1/2-inch piece of MDF, same length as the fence, about 6 inches wide, screwed that to the bottom, and that allowed me to attach a little block to attach a little Destaco clamp hold down there. So now this whole thing travels with me. I put it in place, it gets clamped in place, and now I've got a portable cross-cutting sled, super accurate with sliding stops and a hold down. And to me, it's just like, that was like one of the happiest afternoons in my shop ever. So what prompted that? That I was teaching in a situation where I couldn't pre-cut these parts for students. They had to do it. I comfortable with my table saw, goes all the way back to that whole history of using a table saw on that path I've been on, and sort of being able to think through that situation to come up with a solution that is super simple and offers super, super accurate results. And so it's just that, I guess the tool is the actual fence itself. I think the technique is just creative problem solving in woodworking. I think it comes down to that. You can never learn enough. You can never watch enough videos, read enough books, attend enough classes to be prepared to handle every eventuality without having to come up with your own creative solution to the problem. And I think that, to me, is the core of woodworking, is that you're in your shop. How do you make this work? How do I cut this hole to the exact diameter of a stupid piece of pipe where I can't even measure what that is, let alone buy a drill bit for that?
That's an interesting, I feel like when you're problem solving, that's when I get most excited as well. Like when you come up with a solution. I was really fortunate to have spent some time at Rosewood and at his shop with Michael Fortune. And I mean, he has the cleverest ways of coming up with work holding for repeatability, for accuracy, for all of those sorts of things, and not just for table saws, for routers, for band saws, for pretty much anything. And so that blew my mind the first time I kind of saw how he approached those sort of things. And it basically I went at that point from not having any sort of idea of how I would hold a piece in space in order to have a tool come along and do its thing. And then all of a sudden, Michael Fortune shows up and he's got 26 different jigs, as Michael Fortune does. And They're all super accurate and easy and safe to use and all those other things. And it just, it sort of got my mind geared up to say, okay, this is possible, right? Like when people say, like when I teach design, I always say, like, don't even think at the beginning about how you're going to build it. Because if you do that, all you'll do is be a master at the cubist movement, right? You'll be making boxes all day. And so, but if you understand that you're not going to develop something that's unbuildable, right? Jacques-Emile Ruhlmann, who was a designer, like wasn't a woodworker, he came up with designs that like, you really can't do that in wood. And then he would just fire that woodworker and get another one in. And then they would be like, oh, sure, Jacques, we can make this. And so it's not really much different than it is today. But the reality is that like he didn't know what could be done or not done. And then it just depends on the woodworker coming up with the solution. Right? Yeah. How do you do this? How do you make, I tried to make a torpedo leg once, but the traditional way, which was to do it in segments.
Oh, right.
And then glue, and then veneer each facet, and then put a tiny rabbet on each facet, and then a piece of inlay goes in there. And it's like, is it hard to do? Oh, yeah. Would I ever do it again? No. But it can be done. And so what, you know what I mean? It's all we do is solve problems. And Mike, your problem was you had no idea how big that fence was. So it's like, how do I make a fence for the fence?
Well, and your solution now carries on for every class you go to or whatever. This is a repeatable thing. My only question, does it fit in your luggage?
Yeah, by like half an inch. Yes.
You need bigger luggage.
I'm waiting for the day that Mike gets a big van.
Me too.
And fits it out with like a bunk and a sink and room for his jigs and just travels around the country teaching classes. The van pulls up to this woodworking guild. Mike's here. He's going to sell t-shirts that say I like simple and I like perfect, and teach people how to make cool jigs.
And it would have to have one of those cool horns, like the Dukes of Hazzard. You would have to.
I don't think that's
Mike's
cool
here. Ice cream.
It would just be the Ice Cream Man song. Yeah,
man, yeah.
Little window.
You see woodworkers just running out of the shop. Just, hey,
throw me some money.
The AWFS Fair is this year's largest woodworking exhibition in North America and will take place at the Las Vegas Convention Center from July 25th through the 28th. Attendees will have a chance to see the latest equipment, power tools, hand tools, materials, and supplies at this year's event. In addition, the College of Woodworking Knowledge will offer over 50 seminars in 7 different topic tracks, including furniture, cabinet and millwork, techniques and applications, and business management. To join this year's largest gathering of woodworking suppliers, you can register at awfsfair.org, awfsfair.org, and enter the discount code Built for Vegas, no spaces, in order to receive early bird pricing on your show registration by July 21st. See who's exhibiting, learn more about the educational seminars, and everything else the show has to offer for the woodworking community. Again, that's awfsfair.org. Should we try and answer a quick one?
Which one's the quick one?
The when do you sell something isn't quick.
Yeah.
All right.
It's like Dante's Inferno with the different levels of hell. So the question was like, how do I know when it's time to get rid of a tool that I don't use very often? And I think you need different levels. So like the top level is like in your tool chest or your toolbox, it lives there. It's like, well, it doesn't get used enough there, so it's going to go in this drawer over here. Okay, then it's going to live over there for a while until maybe it gets booted out to a secondary drawer. And then it's like, okay, I have honestly not used this thing for this many years. Then the thing is this. Okay, so you have this tool. If you have room for it, it's just sitting somewhere, fine. you want to sell it, then you need to think in terms of what you're going to make by selling it, and make sure that you're investing that money into something else. Because if it's just, you sell a vintage Stanley number 8 plane, even with a cracked sole and no blade, for $45, but then you use that $45 on McDonald's or Jersey Mike's and it's gone, then what was the point of selling it? So I think that money, it needs to translate into another something else that of value. So you can now look at this set of Fuller bits with countersinks that used to be a Stanley number 8 hand plane you didn't use. That's nice.
So this is a rare one where Mike answers the question before we ask it.
It's like Jeopardy.
What is...
I will just summarize the question real quick to get the details in for the listener. And I hesitate with this one because I just realized this one's from a buddy of mine, Kevin Almeida, and he is slated to buy the shooting board that has been sitting in the corner of my shop for about 9 months. I have proof that you promised to buy it, and I have a witness as well, Kevin. When do you know it is the right time to let go of a tool? I did a quick survey of my shop, came up with several that I haven't touched in years. Scrub plane, number 7 joiner, third powered router, cabinet scraper, blah, blah, blah. I don't know how to say that word. The pragmatist? Is that how you say it?
Pragmatist.
Oh my God.
You have to put the accent on the other syllable, Ben.
The pragmatist in me is saying sell, sell, sell. But the woodworking romantic in me is saying to cherish them and hold on to them because I'll surely need them the day after I sell them. From Kevin. So, Mike, you have nicely answered, and I agree with you to a certain extent, which is why somewhere in this shop there is hidden an Altoids tin with cash. After I sell a tool, it goes in that tin. And that is the shop fund.
Oh, I like that. Okay.
I do the same thing. Anytime I sell anything from the shop, it gets reinvested back into the shop. I don't sell it for groceries. I don't sell it for...
If you need to sell it for groceries, you need to sell it for groceries.
Hey, listen,
and that's fine.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But I'm exactly the same sort of idea that Mike is. It's like you have to sort of be real about things too. It's like, I'm fortunate to have a 12-inch jointer. And so that means I don't use a scrub plane anymore, right? If I didn't have a 12-inch jointer, I would still have a scrub plane, right? And so for me, I don't have that big long tool or that big, sort of Hagen tool because I have other ways to do that. It doesn't mean that you need a jointer, right? Or a thickness planer for that matter. But if you have other ways to do it, and it sounds like, this scrub plane has been sort of languishing for years because obviously he's got other ways to do it. So I think you just have to be real about it. I am not romantic about any of my tools. Any one of them could be on the chopping block if it stopped being useful. There are I love my tools. I love my hand tools. Sometimes I buy tools just for the sake of having them, but in which case they're still benefiting me, right? Like the last time I was in Australia, I bought an H&T Gordon shoulder plane made out of ringed gidgee. Did I need a shoulder plane? Absolutely not. Did I need a shoulder plane from H&T Gordon? Absolutely. And so that's one of those things where it sits in here. And when I do need a shoulder plane, it's the nicest shoulder plane I've ever seen. But I mean, sometimes we buy things and things live in our shop because we like them, right? And so that is, for me, it doesn't have to get used in order to be useful in my shop. So I think you just have to be pragmatic about things. You have to understand that some stuff you want to keep, some stuff you don't want to keep. If it's just a matter of like, if you're being sort of really cold about it and saying, listen, this tool is not being used anymore, I'm just going to get rid of it. Great. Sell it, reinvest it, put it in the Altoids tin, do what you're going to do. But if it means something to you, then hang on to it. Find a spot for it. Hang it from the rafters. Do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Did you say hang it from the rafters because I have way too many wooden hand screws hanging from the rafters?
Well, you don't have way too many. You have the amount that you need.
That's debatable even from me. That's about it. Well, that does it for this episode of Shop Talk Live. If you are watching on YouTube, please click that thumbs up button. If you feel like helping us out financially, you can become an unlimited member and get access to the magazine and all that website has to offer. Or you could become a magazine subscriber. Both great ways of supporting the show. If you have any questions or comments, please send them into shoptalklive@taunton.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Thanks for listening.
Mike, I think we could have an entire episode just going over Ben's decisions. And why he does the things that he does.
Do I have to be there?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, see, no go. If you gave me an episode I don't have to be at, it could be about that. I don't care. That's fine. That's a freebie. I get a little vacation.